Once, the British High Street was a living map, each shop a heartbeat marking time through generations that never planned to vanish. Windows glowed with memory, bakers dusting flour, barbers swapping gossip, florists wrapping hope into paper tied with careful string. You didn't go shopping there, you went belonging. A daily pilgrimage where faces mattered more than prices or convenience. Every bell above a door had its own melody, a small announcement that someone had come home, if only for a moment. Ask yourself, when did walking become rushing? When did errands replace encounters? When did silence swallow the friendly noise of trade? The street once smelled of bread, soap, paper, rain, a collage of scents that told you life was near and working quietly. Children pressed coins into counters they could barely reach, learning the currency of trust before they learned mathematics. The grocer knew your name, your grandmother's ailments, your preferred apples. Green for tartness, red for sweetness, both for comfort. Every exchange carried conversation, and every conversation built another invisible brick in the wall of belonging. But one by one, shutters fell like eyelids closing on stories that thought they'd never end. Progress arrived quietly, wrapped in discounts and convenience, speaking in slogans that promised everything except presence. Ask yourself, what did we save in minutes that we lost in meaning? What did we trade when doors stopped ringing hello? Online replaced over the counter. But you can't download the sound of your name said kindly by someone who remembers your parents. The high street didn't die. It faded, gently, the way light fades from a photograph left too long in the sun. Now, glass fronts mirror empty pavements, and mannequins stare into streets that no longer stare back. Posters promise reopening soon, but the glue peels faster than the optimism holding it together. A few survivors remain. The key cutter, the cobbler, the newsagent, still fighting our irrelevance with routine and quiet dignity. Inside, you'll still hear the radio crackle, the hum of fluorescent light, and the stubborn rustle of paper refusing extinction. Do you remember the sound of coins sliding across a counter, the human weight of patience exchanged for kindness? That sound was Britain's heartbeat, soft, rhythmic, entirely unprofitable, and utterly irreplaceable. Some streets still hold their breath between memory and modernity, caught in the strange half-light where the past refuses to surrender completely. You can see ghosts in reflection, not haunting, just waiting. The outlines of shopkeepers who still check the clock out of habit. Their windows are dusty now, but if you look close enough, you'll see fingerprints that never belonged to tourists or machines. Ask yourself, when did variety become chaos? When did choice start to mean distance instead of connection, emptiness instead of freedom? The new stores come and go like seasons that forgot how to settle, each promising relevance, none managing to stay long enough to matter. Once, a single street could tell a lifetime, where you were born, who you loved, how you grew old, all within walking distance. Now, everything stretches too far to hold, and somehow nothing feels close enough to keep. You can still find traces of the old rhythm, a cracked tile outside a shop that sold records, a faded sign that still says open. The buildings remember what we don't, how to listen, how to wait, how to mean something simply by existing. A high street was never about commerce, it was choreography. The elegant repetition of human need meeting human kindness. Every light switch, every broom handle, every evening routine was a small act of faith that tomorrow someone would still come. The new world forgot that faith, mistaking speed for success, forgetting that some things only grow slow and side by side. Ask yourself, do we really want everything delivered? Or do we still crave the weight of belonging delivered by hand? Because every parcel that arrives alone at your door carries the silence of a conversation that never happened. There's no hello in a barcode, no warmth in a digital receipt, no story in a cardboard box. The streets know this. That's why they wait, patient as old friends who refuse to leave before you come back. Sometimes, walking through them feels like reading a love letter written in fading ink, addressed to a nation that once understood presence. Every closed door is still an invitation to remember, to rebuild, to ask again what it means to know a place by heart. The disappearing high street isn't gone. It's only paused, holding its breath, waiting for us to notice what we've lost. And maybe when we finally stop scrolling long enough to look up, we'll realize the map was never lost, only folded. Do you remember your first shop? The one that smelled of pencils, ink, and sugar, where even time seemed willing to wait its turn. What replaced that feeling? Another app? another sale, another empty click that ends with a box and no conversation. Every town still has one street that dreams aloud, whispering through the cracks, asking if we'll ever learn to walk slow again. Ask yourself, when did noise become comfort? When did silence start feeling like loss instead of rest? There was a kind of education in those aisles. Learning names, waiting patiently, earning trust one nod at a time. You didn't buy from a brand, you bought from a person who remembered your father's stories and your mother's favourite tea. Each transaction was a thread, weaving strangers into something bigger than profit, something we didn't know we'd miss until it unraveled. The new world calls it nostalgia, but maybe it's memory, warning us that connection can't be mass-produced or sold in bulk. Have you ever walked past an old storefront and felt the weight of every voice that used to echo inside? That's not sadness, that's recognition. Your own life reflected in the glass, asking quietly to be slowed, not replaced. A single street once defined a community, and now we live in thousands of digital ones without knowing a single neighbour's name. How do we find our way back? Not to the past, but to the patience that made those small worlds sacred. Because belonging never needed bandwidth. Only eye contact, only time, only a willingness to show up again tomorrow. Even now, you can still hear it. A door creak, a shop bell, a voice saying morning to no one in particular. It's faint, but it's there. The sound of Britain reminding itself it still knows how to talk without type. Every empty storefront is a stage waiting for the next act. Not revival, but return. Quieter, slower, more human. The future won't be built by algorithms. It will be built by footsteps, one small door at a time, reopening to trust. Ask yourself, what would happen if we all decided to buy one thing face to face again? Would the world feel closer? Because every purchase used to come with conversation, and every conversation used to remind us who we were meant to be. Maybe that's the secret the high street still keeps. That what we call loss is just another chance to turn around and begin again. Some mornings, you can still see them. The early risers, opening shutters, sweeping pavements, rehearsing hope like a ritual older than their rent. The sound of a broom brushing stone still carries the rhythm of a country that refuses to automate everything that matters. Do you remember how shop windows looked before the world learned to scroll? Imperfect, personal, messy, with pride and fingerprints. Each one told a story, handwritten in chalk, painted on glass. A declaration that someone believed beauty belonged in everyday work. Ask yourself, when did handmade become outdated? When did effort start feeling like weakness instead of love given form? The butcher, the tailor, the newsstand, the record shop, they weren't services, they were characters in a living play called home. Now, those roles stand empty, the stage still set, the lights waiting, the audience too distracted to notice the curtain never fell. A city without its small shops is a body without its pulse. Efficient, impressive, but somehow missing the warmth that proves it's alive. Progress was supposed to make things easier, but why does everything faster feel lonelier, cheaper, harder to remember? Do you ever stop mid-scroll and miss the slow miracle of someone wrapping your purchase like it mattered who you were? Because that care wasn't about product, it was about presence. Proof that attention could still be sacred, that time could still be kind. Somewhere in every town there's a street that hums softly at night, dreaming of laughter, of open doors, of footsteps return. The buildings don't want pity, they want participation. A reason to shine again under the same lights that once promised belonging. You can almost hear them ask, will you walk with me again? Just once, without a screen between us and the world. Every boarded window hides a story unfinished. Every lock remembers the shape of a key still waiting to be turned. And maybe that's what the high street is now. Not gone, just sleeping. Like an old song waiting for someone to remember the words. Ask yourself, when it wakes, will we still know how to greet it? How to slow down long enough to belong again? Because no matter how much changes, the first rule of being human stays the same. We find meaning in one another, and the streets that raised us still remember that truth, whispering it softly through dust and glass, waiting for us to listen. Maybe it's time to answer, to step back inside, to buy something small, and pay with presence instead of speed. Evening will come, soft and familiar. The street lights flicker into life, like memories testing their strength against the dark. Shadows will stretch across shop fronts, touching faded signs that once promised everything a person could need within walking distance. Do you remember how those lights used to mean safety? How every glow was a beacon saying you're almost home? Now they shine over silence, over the ghosts of conversations that once stitched the night together with laughter and routine. Ask yourself, when did we start confusing quiet with emptiness? When did solitude replace community and call itself progress? The high street was never just commerce. It was communion, the exchange of smiles and stories disguised as errands and chores. Every shopkeeper was a guardian of ordinary miracles, making the world smaller, friendlier, more comprehensible one interaction at a time. You didn't just buy bread, you bought proof that kindness still had a storefront, that care still clocked in every morning. The new world tells us convenience is freedom, but freedom without connection tastes like bread without salt, easy but lifeless. Have you noticed how modern light feels colder? How it illuminates everything but warms nothing at all? There's a particular glow to memory, the warm amber filament bulbs, the reflection of care in imperfect glass. You can still see it in photographs, the blur of motion, the softness of smiles that didn't know they'd become archived. Ask yourself, what will our descendants inherit? A cloud of data or the scent of rain on stone outside a shop that knew our name? We scroll past thousands of faces, but none remember us. A single shop bell once did, and that was enough. Every closed shutter hides a heartbeat still learning how to rest, still dreaming of the moment someone knocks again. Because a street without footsteps isn't dead, it's just waiting. Patient as soil before spring, quiet but full of promise. Do you remember the sound of Sunday mornings, the newspaper stand opening, the world beginning in the most ordinary way? That ordinariness was sacred, a rhythm too subtle to sell, too human to vanish completely from the bones of this land. And maybe one day soon, we'll tire of speed and find ourselves walking slower, turning a familiar corner back towards something we forgot to miss. When that happens, the high street won't be history. It'll be home again, lit softly by the glow of human pace rediscovered. Night will settle over the town like an old coat, heavy but comforting, filled with the scent of rain and yesterday's conversation. Shop windows will mirror the moon, and for a moment even the empty glass will look alive, breathing quietly with memory. Do you remember standing outside a shop just to look in, not to buy, but to feel part of something already in motion? That feeling was ownership without purchase, belonging without permission, the quiet luxury of being known by a place that expected you. Ask yourself, what's worth more, saving time or saving meaning? Collecting items or collecting moments that make a day feel like a life. The high street taught us the art of repetition, how routine could become ritual, how doing the same thing could still feel new. Every morning, the same greetings, the same coins, the same smiles, and somehow each one mattered more for being ordinary. Now, every day feels identical, yet none are familiar because sameness without presence is just noise in a quieter disguise. There was a language to those streets, one you learn slowly through habit, the nods, the waves, the pauses between words. No app can translate that. No update can restore it. You had to live it to earn fluency in being seen. Do you remember how time moved differently when you walked home carrying a paper bag, warm from the baker's hand? That weight was meaning, a small reassurance that life could still be handmade, imperfect, and enough. The future won't remember the fastest delivery. It'll remember the slow kindness that made small towns feel eternal for just a breath. Ask yourself, when did we stop believing slowness was strength? When did patience become a flaw we were told to outgrow? The street didn't vanish, it was overwritten, replaced by promises that never learned how to linger. But beneath the concrete and screens, the old rhythm still hums, steady as memory, stubborn as hope, waiting for the right listener. Maybe that listener is you, walking alone one evening, feeling something tug at your chest and not knowing why. That's not nostalgia, that's recognition. The world reminding you it still knows your name, if only you'll walk slow enough to hear it. The high street isn't gone, it's sleeping, dreaming in the dark, waiting for us to remember that presence is the oldest form of love. And when we do, when we finally arrive again, the lights will turn on without ceremony, and Britain will quietly exhale. Morning will rise again, thin and pale, touching rooftops that still remember the warmth of conversations now stored inside the bricks. The postman will walk the same route as always, his steps echoing through streets that pretend to be empty, but never truly are. Do you remember when his knock meant connection, not obligation? When letters were slower, but somehow said more than all our messages combined? Every envelope carried fingerprints, a heartbeat sealed in paper, a promise that time spent writing was time spent caring. Ask yourself, when did effort start to feel like inconvenience? When did quickness become the measure of worth instead of thought? The high street used to hum with that effort, slow, deliberate, unpolished, and full of meaning we didn't know we'd lose. Each shopfront was a punctuation mark in the story of a town, a reminder that sentences need pauses to make sense. Now, the words run together, faster, louder, emptier, and we call it progress while forgetting how to listen between the lines. You can still hear the old rhythm if you try. The quiet percussion of doors, footsteps, greetings, and laughter overlapping like chords. That music built Britain, not the politics or the profits, but the pulse of people choosing to show up for one another. Have you noticed how quiet modern convenience feels? How it delivers everything except the sound of being seen? Because the street was never about buying. It was about meeting, about practicing the sacred ritual of being briefly known. Even the walls understood that, leaning slightly inward as if eavesdropping on the heartbeat of their makers. Ask yourself, what would it take to rebuild that kind of closeness? Not in architecture, but in the way we speak and move. It starts small, always small. One hello to a stranger, one purchase made with patience instead of haste. And maybe that's how the street returns, not in grand openings, but in the quiet reopening of attention itself. Every shop front we save becomes a mirror, showing us the faces we forgot we missed, the kindness we stopped expecting. The future will look modern again, but if we're lucky, it will sound old, full of voices layered like harmony, unplanned and real. Because the heart of the high street was never the storefronts, it was the people passing through, each leaving a piece of themselves behind. And as long as footsteps keep echoing, even faintly, the story continues. Unfinished, stubbornly alive, waiting for the next good morning. By afternoon, the light will soften, spilling warmth onto cobblestones that have carried generations of footsteps towards somewhere familiar. Shop doors will open halfway, a gesture between hesitation and hope, as if testing whether the world still remembers how to arrive. Do you remember standing in a doorway just to talk, letting the day stretch longer than it needed to because it felt right? That pause was the point. The slow exchange that turned small talk into belonging and errands into ritual. Ask yourself, when did conversation become background noise? When did words stop touching the air before they vanished into screens? Every town once had a shop that felt like confession, a place where the truth came out easier over counters than over coffee. The grocer knew heartbreaks, the baker kept secrets, and the florist arranged apologies into quiet forgiveness, one petal at a time. Now, the aisles hum with artificial cheer, the voice of automation promising service without eye contact, help without presence. Do you ever miss the awkwardness of real people? The pauses, the laughter, the small mistakes that made kindness feel genuine. Perfection was never the goal. It was the shared imperfection that made the high street human, unpredictable, beautifully alive. Somewhere between neon signs and online carts, we lost the art of staying, of letting moments spill over without needing a reason. The shop bell never hurried anyone. It simply announced, "You are here," and that was enough to make time slow. Every sound mattered. The hum of lights, the scrape of broom bristles, the rhythm of hands exchanging change like a handshake. Ask yourself, what will replace that soundtrack when everything becomes frictionless, noiseless and cold? The quiet we built for efficiency has become an emptiness that echoes louder than any crowd ever could. Still, there are corners that resist. A record shop, a second-hand bookstore, a cafe that refuses to close early. They survive not on profit, but on memory, sustained by the faith that people still crave imperfection done with care. And maybe that's the future. Not rebuilding the past, but learning how to stay long enough for the warmth to grow roots again. Because even the smallest shop can restart the pulse of a street if someone believes enough to open the door and wait. The high street will never be what it was, but it might become what we need. Slower, humbler, alive again. As dust settles, the light will stretch thin across the rooftops, painting the brick in that familiar amber that once meant it was time to head home. Shopkeepers will flip signs from open to close, not as endings, but as small prayers that tomorrow will still bring footsteps to the door. Do you remember how the streets looked just before dark, when windows glowed and every reflection carried the promise of conversation? Those moments weren't busy, but they were full. A kind of fullness that doesn't fit inside a schedule or a shopping cart. Ask yourself, when did rest stop feeling earned? When did we decide that quiet could only mean absence and not peace? Even now, when you walk these streets, you can feel the ghosts of routine, the comfort of things happening slowly and on purpose. There was an honesty in that rhythm. Nothing polished, nothing perfect, Just people learning how to share the same space without hurry. You could tell time by the sound of doors, the laughter from the pub, the last call of a paperboy on his bicycle. That was the language of community, spoken softly, repeated daily, never needing translation because it was built on care. Now, the lights hum brighter, colder, sharper, like they're trying to fill the silence that conversation once took care of. The new signs shine, but none seem to invite. They advertise, they impress, but they don't ask you to stay. Ask yourself, when did everything become temporary? When did we start mistaking movement for progress and noise for life? Every modern success story forgets this. That a place doesn't live through profit. It lives through people remembering it exists. Maybe that's why some shops still open, even knowing the odds. Because hope, like habit, doesn't know how to quit quietly. The owners sweep the same doorsteps, straighten the same shelves, hum the same old songs, and believe someone will still come. And someone always does. One person, one purchase, one heartbeat reminding the street it hasn't been forgotten after all. The truth is, survival doesn't need a crowd, it needs continuity. The steady courage of showing up without applause. Do you remember the feeling of being recognized without introduction? The rare relief of being seen just as you were. That was the high street's real currency. Not money, not goods, but acknowledgement. The exchange of existence for attention freely given. And maybe, in learning to walk slower again, we'll realize the street never died. We simply stopped walking far enough to find it. Night deepens, wrapping the town in quiet, and the shop windows become soft mirrors reflecting the glow of street lamps and passing thoughts. A single window stays lit, a small rebellion against the dark, the kind of light that means someone still believes in morning. Do you remember the sound of a key turning in a familiar door? The click that meant another day had earned its ending? That sound was more than routine. It was belonging closing softly behind you, keeping the cold out and the comfort in. Ask yourself, when did security become isolation? When did the locked door stop meaning safety and start meaning separation? The high street never closed completely. It just dimmed, waiting for the sound of footsteps, the warmth of laughter to wake it again. Each brick remembers the weight of stories, the slow patience of people who built meaning one conversation at a time. Every scratch on the counter, every faded sign is proof that love leaves marks where it's been, even after the people are gone. Have you ever stopped under a streetlight and felt the world breathe as if the ground itself missed being noticed? That's the city's heartbeat, still there beneath the engines, beneath the algorithms, beneath everything we mistook for evolution. Some memories don't need nostalgia, they need continuation. The simple act of being repeated until they feel like home again. Ask yourself, what would happen if tomorrow you took the long way, stopped in a small shop, spoke to someone, and stayed a while? Would the world shift, even slightly, back toward something real? Something warm enough to keep loneliness from settling? Maybe that's all it takes. One door opened, one exchange of words, one moment of care between strangers. Because the high street isn't architecture, it's evidence of patience. Proof that meaning grows in the space between people who take time. Even the wind seems to know this, curling softly through the alleys, carrying echoes of names once shouted in greeting. Do you hear it? That low hum beneath the silence, that pulse that sounds suspiciously like us remembering who we are. One day, these lights will burn brighter again, not for profit, but for presence. A reminder that civilization starts with simple recognition. And when that happens, the streets won't just return. They'll forgive us, quietly, for forgetting what made them human in the first place. The last light will go out, not from failure, but from faith. Knowing someone will come tomorrow and turn it back on again. When morning comes again, the light will fall gently across the windows, the same way it has for hundreds of years. Dust will dance in the air, golden and slow, carrying the weight of a million small moments that refuse to disappear. The shutters will open, the bells will ring, and the sound will travel through the street like a memory stretching its limb. Do you remember how the world used to greet the day, not with urgency but with quiet optimism, soft as fresh breath? That rhythm is waiting, patient and forgiving, asking only that we show up again, ready to listen instead of rush. Every open door will whisper the same invitation. Come in, stay a while, leave as someone who belongs. Because the high street was never built from stone alone. It was built from repetition, kindness, and the courage to keep returning. Ask yourself, what would happen if we all decided to return, not as customers, but as caretakers of what connects us? A town isn't lost when its shops close. It's lost when we forget to look each other in the eye. The buildings can be rebuilt, but the language of community must be spoken daily, or it fades like breath on cold glass. And yet it's still here, the rhythm, the possibility, the gentle hum beneath the noise that says, we're not finished. One conversation, one shared cup, one familiar nod. That's all it takes to wake the street from its long, quiet sleep. The world won't end with silence. It will begin again with a simple good morning spoken without agenda. Do you feel it now? That faint pulse beneath your feet, steady and forgiving, reminding you that nothing truly disappears. Because this isn't a eulogy for what's gone. It's a reminder for what can return if we choose to walk slowly again. The disappearing high street never vanished. It waited, faithfully, for footsteps willing to believe in presence over perfection. So when you pass that old shop front, look up, smile, and know that every echo you hear is the sound of belonging coming back to life. And as you walk away, the light behind you will seem warmer, the world gentler, as if Britain itself exhaled in relief. We were never meant to outgrow togetherness, only to remember it, to carry it forward, one small street at a time. And that's where the story ends, or maybe begins again, with a door that opens, a bell that rings, and someone whispering, "Welcome back."